on a little bit of a piece of from a wonderful book called The Piano Shop on the Left Bank. A man in Paris starts hanging out at a piano shop and gets friends with the owner, and it's a wonderful book. I recommend it if you can find it. So, three people stand in a shop in Paris looking at an old piano. It might have been played by Beethoven. The veneer is sumptuous, though blistered where separated from the shaping pieces. Inside, no cast iron frame, but thick wooden struts. The woman attempts a scale, but many of the notes are missing. It's like trying to capture moonlight in a net. The man marvels at the piano's age and that it had been made entirely by hand. The shop owner tells them the trees for the wood were most likely planted in the late 16th century. The woodworking guilds of Germany planted trees so their children's children's children would have the right kind of wood harvested sometimes 250 years later. Then it was cured from 10 to 40 years. Even in the 19th century, such wood was rare, but now it is a substance that has gone out of the world we live in. Well, you know, what are we planting now that our grandchildren 250 years now are going to have when they come around? Something to think about, or not. I'm debating between two. We're on opposite pages here, so I'll read the shorter one. Loneliness. Bus across the fells of Mull. Road a single lane between hills, barren, brown, hardly a sheep to note our coming. Bus mostly filled with the collared clergy, heavy voiced, though on retreat, and some chattering women of the church. I feel superior, particularly to one caller who again and again stands in the lurching aisle to bring information about car rentals and ferry prices to those not terribly wanting to hear. I've got the brochure in my bag, he says again and again to faces dressed in politeness. Then I see the tweed coat around his black dicky is old, and its bottom seem unstrung, and my heart eases towards him. In the middle of nothing, the bus stops, and a woman I had not noticed rises, carrying a sleeping red-haired boy over her shoulder. She gets off. My eyes follow her down a road I had not seen, to a farm I had not seen, a trailer and some fencing at the end of a rocky path. She does not look back at as our gears grind and we lunge forward. Years later, I think of her loneliness, and the loneliness of the small red-haired boy when he awoke, and the loneliness of the clergyman, and of loneliness. Well, I'll read this one quickly and then get on to my, how things happen. Rain comes when it will, it doesn't care for us. It's hitchhiking its way to the sea on a cloud. The sun is interested in its own fires. If light comes, so be it. Bees feel an itch on their legs, only nectar can soothe. So many gifts from indifferent givers. We walk through the world and smile, remembering an old love. And Ramona, passing by, thinks, that man thinks I'm pretty, and walks in a way that makes her more beautiful. And Henry, walking down the street, notices, makes a pass, and they end up having a good marriage. Isn't that the way, isn't that the causal chain in your life? You know, that kind of weird thing. There's no understanding. If you think logic, you're dead. You know, that's just so. Okay. Well, that's too depressing a poem. I can't read that at this point, so I won't. There are so many things I'd like to read, of course, as we all have that moment. But here's a going on with my Aeneas poem, just Aeneas at the coffee shop. An old man, cane propped, walks by, steadied by his son, who is old enough to have his own stoop. Not a lot of hair between them. How far they've come through a wilderness of days to get to this morning's sweet roll and coffee. And here I am, 20 years older than my father when he died, and I don't know if I am carrying him or if he still is carrying me. This is Talking to the Operator. I'm reading rushingly on now as we go here. Talking to the Operator. 1950, I'm 16, freshman at a small Kentucky college, Breckenridge Hall, men's dorm in the entrance at the bottom of the stairwell, one phone, long distance, too expensive to use except to ask home for money. One late fall night, loneliness dark in the air. Three of us just come back separately from somewhere, reluctant to go to bed, standing by the black instrument fixed to the wall, earpiece hanging from a black wishbone, connected by a brown wire to a box with a miniature megaphone-like thing jutting out. Big T Gross says in Southern, let's call the operator. Let's call the operator and sing our song. So he picks up the earpiece. Someone of the feminine persuasion answers, what number are you calling, please? Who was she, young or old? Couldn't tell, but I imagined her young and pretty and lonely like us, sitting in front of all those wires, ready to plug something into something so someone could speak to someone. So we began singing. Can't remember what, some song we all knew, loud and boisterous, good old Mountain Dew, or soft and sweet, moonshine shines tonight along the moonlight shines tonight along the Wabash. Just don't remember. Anyway, after the song, we took turns chatting until some local made a call and she hung up on us to connect someone else to someone else. I thought of her off and on through the decades, sitting by her midnight switchboard waiting. I've sung in many a fine concert with many a fine chorus, but this morning, this is the one I remember. And I seem to be hoping the operator found the right number to plug in and went on unlonely to have a good life. Definitions. Behind the black outline of a split-trunked tree, a gray sky meets a gray sea. It is as if heaven and sea were one in a gray ease. Is there no demarcation then between heaven and sea, no place where one is one and the other the other? Ah, but the bright sun rises with all its knowing, drawing a line, says, this is the sea, that heaven, and we look about the world thinking, this is me, that is everything else. But remembering that moment before the sun rose. I have some artist friends out here. This is sort of for them. I wrote an introduction to my friend who did the artwork, and this Patrick Solgoski. And I'll just read a few things. He did put on a show, wonderful show, based on Homeric themes. And he asked me to write the introduction, the little piece in front of it. And I'll just read you a little bit of that because I think it's interesting for an artist. A line is a point that sets off on a journey at a location that wants to go elsewhere. And where is it going? Paint, too, is a storyteller. Color, a voice. Shape, a history. A painter is someone listening to that storyteller and trying to get it right. An artist's brush is a bow no one else can pull. This is another, I have a whole section in this book on the Odyssey with a number of poems related to it. And it's amazing how much you can find out about your own life by reading these things from 3,000 years ago. So I'm imagining, I'm imagining Odysseus' home from his journey. This is called the bed. After he'd lain again with Penelope, Odysseus, awake, listened to her gentle snore and smiled. He'd forgotten it, or maybe it had come while he was away. Restless. He found himself restless and wondering at home in the bed he'd made, yet restless, restless. How many nights had he longed to be just here when sea-wracked or even caught in the arms of a goddess? He rose, padded out to the palace garden. The moon shone so bright the trees cast shadows. Those saplings they'd planted when Telemachus was born towered over the walls. The sons he had not planted would never be. Young, he thought a life could have many voyages. But now he saw that there was only one. So this is another take on the Odyssey completely there, and this is Penelope. This time it is Penelope who goes off while Odysseus stays home to mind the kingdom, not to a war, but to the wedding of a special girlhood friend married off to a barbarian to seal a treaty. Then things kept coming up for 20 years. Not monsters so much, though sometimes monstrous things. This is a life, after all. The god she angered was Zeus, who preferred that women stay at home, but he largely ignored her, having his own affairs to attend to. So mostly she lost her handmaidens through natural causes, cholera, accident, love. She lost none to Scylla or Charybdis, giving herself time to sail around. The sirens, they ignored her, no need to waste music on a sister. Oh yes, there was a man on whose island she spent some time. Though it was clear he was no immortal, sometimes he made her feel as if she might be. Towards the end, tired of the gypsy life, she traded her last jewel for passage home. The curious Phoenicians thought this dusty graying woman claimed to be a queen, a little daft as they rowed her ashore. But queen she was, for an old woman curtsied and an old dog, for once not barking, stretched out its gray head. At the palace, she found her husband besieged by women wanting to be queen. Odysseus had been faithful in his own way, favoring one woman, then another, weaving relationships at night, which he undid in the morning. He had always expected his wife to come back. At her entrance, the suitors rose, sniffed at this unlikely female, but when the king rose and bowed, they turned, gathered perfumes, robes, ornaments, and scattered like bats at dawn to isles where royalty might be a little less canny. That night, the wife and husband lay down in their ancient bed, each wondering how much they should say to each other. So, well, I have 4 minutes here, so I have I'll read you the history of everything so we can get it all together. This is my second version of the history of everything. I have the history of everything 1, but I'll read you history of everything 2. A lament for the lost phrase, a lay for the never said, a song for the thoughts that timid knock, but were not asked in, who wander lonely, looking for drink, dance, welcome, setting up camp on the edge of a dream, fleeing just before you open your eyes. Out of the 4 elements, all things are formed. In the kitchen, the dishwasher sings a sloshy song over the airwaves. The modern jazz quartet brings an obligato of silver fire. I said air, so I must look for earth and find her in the garden, jamming with forsythia. Waking to the sun, rising, thinking how long light took to get here from the first let there be, thinking how far it has to go before time that takes survey of all the world must have a stop. Day in gray pajamas yawns, stretches behind the far hills, then dresses in bright clothes to walk about the backyard with his friends. He reaches through the window to touch my forehead with a father's blessing. Rot of the forest floor seem as a prayer rug. Rot of leaf, twig, branch, bits, pieces of fallen trees, armies of mushrooms beneath cap helmets, the droppings of small animals upon the grainy moss. What better place to ask for blessing? Thinking of angels, sometimes we see a sliver of light like the reflection off a shiny surface, but there is no shiny surface. Sometimes between you and the sea, a transparent opaqueness. They haven't fallen. They've drifted down, drawn by the gravity of what? Flesh, love, hunger, ending. Brahma dreams his delicious dreams between wake and sleep. It is the world he dreams, and the stars, and all possibilities. And we, the dreams, dream back the dreamer, shutting his eyes and seating him cross-legged on a lotus. We dream for him our own heroes, how one at the end of a hard life of heroing is offered heaven. But he says no, refusing to accept that old fracturing into heaven and hell. And I'll read the one that I thought was too depressing to read back then. It's a good one to close with here. This is called On Entering Elysium. Arato, as you know, you all know, is the muse of lyric poetry. On entering Elysium, Arato gives us a key to the library of the poems we did not write. It is a moment of unbearable sadness. Some refuse it. Some take the key, but never try the lock. Some enter, find a chair, and fall asleep. Most shelves hold the dreams you didn't remember or remembered for a while, but didn't write down. Next, shelf after shelf of journals of days unwritten, not remembered, ideas that came so fast a blink blew them away, and the bits and pieces, poems even from your unopened or lost journals, and a little corner for the few that found their way into the world. At the end waits the shelf of great poems you didn't have the confidence, courage, or ambition to attempt. Well, that's a nasty poem to end with, isn't it? I'm not sure I feel comfortable ending there, but I can't think of a different ending. So I thank you, Erica, for allowing me, and I thank you all who are here to hear me read.